So I'm just going to power up the recovery unit here. One thing it's going to show me here is the weight of the 25 pounds, 3.5 ounces. So it's showing me the weight of the refrigerant tank, which should be 30 pounds when it's full. And then it zeroes out to a calibrated 0. So underneath this tank is an electronic scale. So the way we're measuring how much we recover, or way we program how much we charge into the system, is by weight. So this unit isn't built to go out in a field service truck and go out in the field and do work. This is basically to work in a shop. So if you're heading out in the field, they make a portable scale that you can weigh your refrigerant tank out in the field. And there are some that actually connect to the refrigerant lines, and you can program them to open and close valves when the refrigerant level gets to the right amount. But this is really just an electronic scale, this particular one. And you can see our tank pressure is right around the 80 psi that we'd expect at this ambient temperature. If the pressure has climbed, you may have air in your system, and there's an air purge button here where you can let some air off the top of the tank and get it back down to that proper pressure that matches the ambient temperature. So we can go into a recover mode manually on this one. I don't want to get too specific about this unit because it's not likely to be the one you'd see in your service shop. You might have a Robinair or a Snap-on or something, but this one, they're all very similar, but this one got some specific steps through the controls. I'm going to go into the automatic system. I should mention before I go there too, one thing I did is I checked. There's a vacuum pump in here that's going to pull a vacuum on the system as part of our leak testing, and I want to make sure there's vacuum pump oil in that vacuum pump. The pump has a special lubricant that goes in it, and you can very quickly damage a vacuum pump if it doesn't have vacuum pump oil in it. So we want to make sure that's there. I also probably would want to make sure that I've got new refrigerant oil. This is not vacuum pump oil. This is oil that's going to go into the machine's AC system, and that's the oil that lubricates the compressor and travels around with the refrigerant. And then we've got a recovery bottle where we pull out the old dirty oil. So when we recover, we'll measure how much refrigerant we get. We'll also measure how much oil we get out of the system, and then we'll have to make a judgment call about how much we're going to have to put back. If we've lost some refrigerant, we've undoubtedly lost some oil too. So we're gonna make that determination. So I'm going to go into the automatic mode here. I just pressed automatic. It tells me to press go, and it asks me to set a vacuum time, how long I want to pull a vacuum on the system. I'll leave it at its default 10 minutes. It's not going to vacuum yet. It's going to do it after it recovers, but it has me program that in. And then it's asking me how much refrigerant I want to put in the system when we recharge it. So the answer is 3.2 pounds. So there's 16 ounces in a pound. So 0.2 or 20% would be 3.2 ounces. So I'm going to put in 3 pounds, 3.2 ounces. Or I'm going to tell the machine to. So I'm just holding this so it scrolls up. 3 pounds. I can't get that specific. 3 pounds, 2.5 ounces is what I'm going to set it to. So then once I've told it how much we're going to put in, it's kind of an odd step to go through before we've even recovered, but then it automatically starts recovering. So it's now drawing the refrigerant out of the machine, and it's going to tell us how much it gets. So far it's only pulled an ounce. So we'll let this pull for a while and we'll see what we get here. If I look at the gauges, I can see it's gone from 20 psi, even just pulling that 1 ounce out, it's already dropping into a vacuum on the low side. So the high side needle just has a peg, it stops out at 0. But now you can see we're pulling about 15 inches of vacuum. Eventually you'll hear the vacuum pump start up, and it'll start to pull a higher vacuum on the system. So yeah, it only pulled the 1 ounce, then it went into a vacuum hold, and then we've started up the vacuum pump, and now we're evacuating for 10 minutes. So it's pulling a vacuum on the system. What that's going to do is pull any moisture that might have been in the system out. When you pull water into a high vacuum, just like on the suction side of a hydraulic pump, if you pull oil into a vacuum in cavitation, that oil will boil. Well, so will water. And again, it's just like a cavitation vacuum. It's not a high temperature boiling, it's a vacuum boiling. So you pull water into a vacuum, if there is any water in the system, it's going to boil into a vapor. And there's actually a vent, you can't see it on this machine, but there's a vent on the vacuum pump, and you'll see steam coming out there, cold steam, and that tells you you've had some moisture in your system. So again, if you need to do this type of work in the field, you're not likely to take a unit like that in a service truck. You can have a portable vacuum pump like this that can connect to the refrigerant. And again, this is a vent where you would see steam exiting as you're pulling a vacuum on the unit. Again, we got a sight glass. Looks like this one needs some vacuum pump oils. It's very low in the sight glass. So there's a portable version of the vacuum pump. So our timer is counting down here from the 10 minutes we programmed in to evacuate. If I was going to be repairing this system and recharging it permanently, I would probably pull the vacuum for about 45 minutes. That's typical amount of vacuum you'd pull on a system. And of course, if I was doing that before I hooked up the vacuum pump and started pulling a vacuum, because this machine has a receiver dryer, I would want to change out that receiver dryer. So the receiver dryer is in a fairly handy spot on this machine. See in here, it does have a sight glass on it. Looks like it's got a relief valve in it, although that might just be a plug where a relief valve would go. I'm not sure if that is actually a relief valve on this one. But there's our receiver dryer around the right side of the engine. And according to our manual, this is where the high-low pressure switch is supposed to be located, but on the actual machine it's not matching the manual. I don't see it here. I don't know how I missed this before. It's right beside our high-side service port. So there's our high-low pressure switch. On this machine, a little different than the manual, it's actually installed in the high-side line coming out of the compressor. So right there is where our high-low pressure switch is. Yeah, I'm starting to think this is just a generic picture that maybe is in all their air conditioning manuals for Volvo construction equipment. We have a BL70 unit with the evaporator in it, I think. And if this is a match, then this one has a right angle expansion valve, not, or sorry, a H-block expansion valve, not right angle as the picture showed. So the evaporator unit in this machine is up in the roof. It's not down in the right console like it was on the John Deere machine. It's up in there. I assume the top roof panel comes off, or the interior headliner comes off to access it. So there's our evaporator. The heater core is not in the roof. The evaporator is actually here by itself, and we've got our blower fans mounted here. So the heater core actually lives in the front helm of this machine, and it has its own fan. So there's actually two sets of fan controls for air conditioning and heating, independent of each other. But one temperature control, clockwise gives us heat, counterclockwise gives us cooling, and then an on-off switch for air conditioning. So this machine's told me now that it's done its vacuum for 10 minutes. It gave me a loud beep, and then it automatically closes off the valves and goes into a vacuum hold. And what we can do here is watch our vacuum gauge. So the valving, the solenoid valves inside the unit here are closed. We've got almost 30 inches of mercury vacuum pulled on the system, and then over the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, as long as we want to watch that needle, we can keep coming back to this and see if we're actually losing our vacuum, which could be an indication of a fairly large leak. So I'm going to watch this over the next 5-10 minutes. If I don't see the needle come up, sometimes it will come up 1 or 2 inches, and that can be evidence of a bubble of moisture left in the system somewhere that will then come out of hiding and cause sort of expansion within the system, and you'll lose a little bit of your vacuum. But if that needle steadily increases and keeps coming up, well, there would certainly be, even temporarily, I wouldn't want to put refrigerant in here because it's not going to hold very long. So I'm going to leave that 5-10 minutes. If the needle stays put, I'm okay to do a temporary charge of this system just for testing purposes before I pull the refrigerant back out of it. While I'm in a vacuum hold, I'm just going to rotate that shaft on the compressor. So I'm not turning the belt, I'm turning the actual plate that would get engaged by the electromagnetic clutch here. And by doing that, I'm rotating the shaft into the compressor. That way, if the compressor seal's bad, I might see the gauge start to climb up. So over the last 10 minutes or so, I've been holding vacuum pretty good. The needle's maybe moved 1 tick. It moved probably after about 2-3 minutes. And then for the last 10 minutes or so, the needle's been staying put. I'm going to leave it about another 5-10 minutes and then come back and recharge. I'll charge the system up to the specified weight of refrigerant if the needle's still staying put. So before I go back to charge it up, I want to drain the oil. I'm going to make note of where the oil level was. I don't suspect with the 1 ounce of refrigerant we pulled out of the system that we're going to get much oil back out. So yeah, I don't see the level. It didn't come up as we pulled the oil out. But if I'd recovered a good quantity of refrigerant, then as I drained the oil from the recovered refrigerant into this bottle, I'd mark how much it came up. If I pulled all the refrigerant out, the specified amount, that would pretty much tell me how much oil to put back in of new refrigerant oil when I go to recharge the system. Here I'm going to have to make a judgment call. Hopefully the manual will tell me how much oil is in the system, and I'll assume we've lost probably 50 to 75% of the oil with the refrigerant that's been lost, so I'll charge it up to 50 or 75% of the required oil that they say the system takes. Well, the BL70 manual is completely silent on how much oil to put in, so I've looked through some different other service manuals for similar sized machines. I found the 310 SK manual has a similar system, expansion valve system that takes 3.75 pounds of refrigerant. So I'm going to use that sort of as a rough guide. It's a little smaller than that, so it should probably take a little less oil than this machine would take. And the John Deere for the 310 says the entire system takes 12, a little better than 12 ounces of refrigerant oil throughout the system. And this manual is pretty good. It actually goes on to tell you where the oil's, in what portions the oil is going to reside through the system, how much is likely to be in the condenser, the compressor, etc. when you shut the machine off. So if you change one component, you've got a pretty good gauge of how much oil to add. So I'm gonna say if we put 6 ounces of oil, we'd probably be a little heavy on that. I'm probably going to put 4 or 5 ounces of oil with the refrigerant into that system, assuming about half of it is lost, and it's probably about 10 ounces of oil. Again, we're guesstimating for the BL70, but I think we'd probably be pretty safe to put 4 or 5 ounces of oil in there for the amount of time we're going to run it, or even for a permanent charge. Sometimes the manuals just aren't going to tell you refrigerant oil. Sometimes they're very explicit. So we're a good 15-20 minutes now holding this vacuum, and the needle is staying pretty steady. So my guess would be that the refrigerant probably has leaked out of this machine over the course of about 10 years. This could be the original refrigerant in the machine. It may never have been serviced. So this might be a machine where we go looking for a leak. We'd have a tough time finding it, but we might just, for conscience sakes, we might just start changing any hoses that look suspicious. Obviously, we'd be changing a receiver, dryer, any lines. We'd have to do a visual inspection on those. So we have to do our due diligence to try and find a leak. We can't just go arbitrarily charging the system up, because R134A is a controlled substance that even though it's not ozone depleting, because it is a greenhouse gas, we have to account for how much we use, where we put it, and why we charged up a system. And to legally charge up a system, we have to document what we found leaking, where we suspect the refrigerant went, and what we did to repair it before we charge it back up. And so this leak test is part of our due diligence as well. So the next thing the machine is prompting me to do is add oil. So I'm going to add new oil to the system. So while it's under vacuum, this is when the system will pull in that new oil. So I topped up our bottle of refrigerant oil, and now it's pulling some in. Again, it's with the vacuum that it's going to be pulling it in. So our vacuum needle is going to come up now because we're pulling some oil into the system. So my oil's in there now. We're going to charge up the system. We pre-programmed the amount to deliver into the system. The pressure gauge immediately jumped up to a pressure matching ambient temperature in the shop as we started to put refrigerant in. So again, the pressure gauge for static pressure isn't an indication of how charged up the system is. Right now I've only got a little better than 1 pound in there, yet it's showing me the full pressure, and that pressure is not going to change even as we get to a full charge. So again, what the unit's doing now is weighing with the digital scale how much the weight of the tank is changing. And while this is going on, you want to watch you don't bump the unit. You don't have any extra weight on the scale or anything odd or anything laying on top of that tank that would be contributing to the charge. So it just gave me a loud beep and it told me the charge is complete. So again, our static pressure didn't change much. We've still only got around our 80 psi that we should have. So our charge is in there, and we're done. Just goes back to showing me what I've got left in the tank. And again, I would have to record that if I was going to leave this refrigerant in there. Of course, we will be pulling this back out into the tank eventually, but we need to record that if we're going to be. We have to account for that whole 30 pounds of refrigerant when you buy a new tank.